In this exploration of the word trust and its underlying assets, the meanings that the word references, will play like water as it moves through different shapes and see what we can discover and learn along the way. I trust you completely, one woman said on a first date. I said, what does that mean? She said, I trust you. I said, would you trust me to do this in this situation? She said, absolutely. I said, but I would not do that in that situation because of this, and this. In other words, I revealed that I was not the person she imagined I was based on a first meeting, and that she could not depend upon herself to guess the man that I was, and that she could not depend upon herself to question her own incompetence in that area. Another look at trust. If someone has done a certain thing, if a scorpion stings and stings and stings and stings, when you trust a scorpion, is it intelligent to trust that it will sting anything that it can sting? Or is it intelligent to trust that a scorpion will start singing Christmas carols? So, if things are the way that they are, and will likely continue to be the way that they are, is it trust to trust that the world that is today will be largely the world tomorrow? And is that trust? I expect you to keep saying the things that you've always said, doing the things that you've always done, thinking the things you've always thought, buying the things you've always bought. And I trust that you are the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being you have presented to me over time. If you say to me, I trust you, is that a complete sentence? Does one need to say, I trust you to do this in this situation? I trust you to tell the truth if I ask you, did you lie? Of course, you have a little paradox there. If you're asking me if I lied, you are communicating a fair amount of presumption that I lied. But if I lied, and you're asking me if I lied, then you're communicating a presumption that I would tell the truth about lying. Is that intelligent? Meaning, can you be trusted to ask such a question? Can you trust someone to do what you disagree with? Because that's what they seem to do in that situation much of the time. Is there a distinction between trust and observation? If you observe that I'm wearing a blue shirt and you trust your eyesight and you trust your comprehension of language and you trust your memory, if you trust that I'm wearing a blue shirt, is that trusting me? Is that trusting your eyes? Is that trusting your memory? Is it trust at all? If you see someone doing this, moving to the right, but they tell you that they're moving to the left, as you watch them moving to the right, what do you trust? The observation of language or the observation of the underlying phenomena that language is intended to reference symbolically? What do you trust? Words or felt, observed experience? If you think of trusting yourself, what does that mean? Do you trust yourself to reliably stop at the moment of success because you have reliably stopped at the moment of success many times? Do you trust yourself to do that again? And if you reliably stop yourself at the edge of success over and over, dependably, do you trust that you have a good reason for doing so? Or do you trust that you will stop yourself at the edge of success, but distrust that you have a good reason for doing so? And do you trust, if you don't have a good reason for doing so, do you trust yourself to go ahead and succeed anyway, to push through that resistance? Or do you trust yourself to turn away at that point? What do you see? Is there a difference between trust and seeing? If you see clearly, then is it possible for someone to lie to you or mislead you? If you see clearly what reality is, can you be deceived by reality, the reality that you're seeing clearly? What is it that underlies the importance of trust in the first place? Well, intelligence is measured by the efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable well-being. So, conserving energy and creating more well-being is more intelligent than wasting energy and creating less well-being. Well, how fun is it to have to put a key into your own house and open the lock every single time you go in and out? Is it cheaper to do away with locks, conserve steel, metals, plastics, conserved the time and money installing the lock, conserved the cost of manufacturing and buying the lock, conserved the time spent opening and closing the lock, the worry, did I lock the house? Is that intelligent? If you could create a reality where people did not violate boundaries, if you could trust that everyone in the circle would knock, and if there was no answer, would not open the door, would not go in and steal your things, if you could trust, meaning if you could look out and see a reality of respect and empathy and integrity and truthfulness, and realized that there was no need for a lock in your reality, is that valuable? If you could open your heart to someone, knowing that they would never knowingly attack you, that they would never knowingly lash out, that they would never knowingly use or abuse you, that they would always tell you the truth, that they would always be interested in how their behavior affected you, and if it affected you badly, would make adjustments to balance that out so that the relationship was sustainable. Would it be intelligent to look with suspicion, cynicism, bitterness, hurt, and fear at a new person entering your life? If one could rely on not being invaded, if one could look out at the species around the globe and see that no one on the globe does aspire to invade your boundary, to take from you, to push you out of the way. And you could get rid of nuclear missiles and all the funding necessary to produce them. You could get rid of the stockpiling of nuclear missiles. And you could redirect the energy spent on locks, spent creating nuclear missiles, spent creating guns, spent creating competency in martial arts, boxing, karate, aikido. If you could redirect that energy to creating high states of sustainable well-being, would that be beneficial? Meaning, would you want such a world? That's the value of trust. Now, it's the value of trust in an environment that is trustworthy. And as with many things, when there is trust, people become more trustworthy, statistically speaking. And when people are more trustworthy, people trust more, statistically speaking. And so this movement towards a more intelligent world, an intelligent world, is a world where very little energy is diverted from the creation of sustainable well-being to the defense of the status quo. When you don't trust countries, when you don't trust neighbors, when you don't trust your community members, and you don't trust yourself, and to some extent they are one and the same, then one must reallocate energy that would otherwise be spent generating and maintaining and building and synergizing in well-being to defending against loss. When one is afraid of loss because one does not trust other people, then one must prepare for the trauma of that encounter, the trauma of loss. And when you lose another person in relationship, it is a trauma. There is a loss of identity. Identity is the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that is cultivated, curated, and repeated in a given context, in a given relationship. And so if I'm with you and we talk about these things in this way for this amount of time, at this tempo, with these feelings present and these body language, that's the pattern. That's my identity. And if you walk away from the exchange and never return, I lose that identity. Because I will never be that way again with anyone else exactly. I'll be older. The tempo will change. The other person isn't quite as interested or is more interested in the topic, and so the pattern changes. When a significant person in our life leaves, we don't know who we are because the identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we curated and cultivated around that person has no home. The identity emerged out of the energy between us and another, and the other is gone. And so the energy in between is gone. And so the identity collapses back into chaos, back into the unknown. And we do not know what the new identity will look like, how it will take shape. It's very vulnerable to lose one's identity, to watch it dissolve, particularly when we cling and hold to that identity, fearing its loss, and it dissolves all the same. When our greatest fear is the loss of identity, when the greatest fear is the loss of control of our identity, when the greatest fear is the loss of control of you that I depend on to experience this identity, and you walk away, and I'm still leaning, and my identity falls, and I don't know who I am. I don't know what the new pattern of identity will be. I don't have my bearings. I don't have a center to my rhythm. The tension I was leaning into is no longer there. I fell backwards and you didn't catch me, you walked away. The identity is broken. The trust in the identity is broken. My loss of certainty. My certainty is broken. My rhythm, my pattern is broken. And One of the defenses we create in a cessation of violation, meaning when people form relationships together and then walk away unilaterally. And that happens too many times. The falling in love, the merging, the becoming as one becomes the point of protection. I will not let you in. I won't let you under my skin. I won't allow you to affect me. That way, when you leave, I will not collapse in the unknown, uncertain of who I am or when and where I will find myself or what the shape will be. If we can trust others, a community, with certainty, we can lean in. We can put all our energy into the future, investing in community well-being, knowing that if and when we fall short, there is a net waiting to catch us. How many hours of a person's life, how many hours of your life is spent opening and locking the door, entering the password and clearing out the data cache, looking over our shoulder to see if we're safe when we're bringing out a wad of $100 bills, investing tax dollars in military expenditures, listening to car alarms that are necessary because the owner of the car could not trust another person not to break in. How much money, how much time, how many natural resources, how much attention, how much fear, how much emotional intensity is organized because I'm afraid that I and you are not trustworthy. Because I'm afraid that if I do not take precautions, the bear will break into the tent and steal the food supply. That if I do not take precaution, the dog will bite me. That if I do not take precaution, the thief will take off with my car. The thief will take my wallet. The hacker will steal my crypto. The newspaper reporter will lie to me and share private information. The other country will invade, will undermine, will sabotage. The disgruntled employee will upend the company. How much of my time, my worry, my attention is preparing for the something bad that I believe will happen and want to protect myself against? That is the cost of distrust. Distrust has three elements. I have to distrust myself to be able to respond spontaneously to whatever happens. I have to distrust you and or others from doing what's best for me. And there must be an environment, a cult, a culture, an ecology that produces people who do not trust themselves to take care of themselves spontaneously in any moment and must make a variety of plans to respond to the feared event, and produces people that are sociopathic and will exploit others in moments of needs. So distrust requires a cult or culture that produces untrustworthy people, incompetent people, ignorant people. Now, why incompetent and ignorant? Well, because it's more intelligent to create trusting and trustworthy people that do not require vast expenditures of defense than it is to produce untrusting and untrustworthy people who must spend vast amounts of their time, money, and natural resources protecting themselves against the sociopathic behavior of the people around them. So if you are knowledgeable and in a knowledgeable culture, everyone agrees to be trustworthy because the yield, the return on that investment is so extraordinarily high. Trusting people in a trustworthy culture produces such a high rate of return on investment, return in the form of sustainable well-being, that you have to be a fool not to choose that if it is available, if it is an option. The cost is extraordinary. Wondering for decades whether one country will drop a nuclear bomb on another country versus trusting that we're not the kind of beings to do that, and trusting that we can come up with better approaches to solving our problems than that. Trust is one of the most valuable resources available. Meaning, if you have access to trust in a trustworthy environment that you have competency and mastery around, what does that mean? Well, if you're the weak link in the chain, meaning you're in a trustworthy environment and other people trust you, but you're incompetent, you didn't learn how to fly the plane, you crash the plane, you kill the beloved, and you lied about it. You said you had a pilot's license. Well, then you're the disseminator of the disease. You're incompetent because you don't know what you're doing. Meaning, an intelligent person does not risk losing something so fragile over something so stupid. You're incredibly stupid. If you shatter that much trust to what? Look good for a few minutes? If you pulled it off, risk your own life? All because you didn't want to say, I'm not competent to fly this plane? I don't actually know the answer to that question. I probably shouldn't pick you up at the airport. I get drunk that time of day, and I'm sorry, and I'm not going to risk your life. You have to be stupid at some level to shatter trust unnecessarily. And to be that stupid, you have to be ignorant and incompetent, meaning you didn't have the intelligence to think it through. Now, for you to be that stupid and that ignorant demands the modeling of stupid and ignorant people. And that's why you don't get You don't get stupid and ignorant people raised in a highly competent, empathic culture. It requires a stupid and incompetent cult that sustains chronic stupidity as part of its protocols in order for a random stupid person to emerge out as if coming out of nowhere, but they're not coming out of nowhere. There is a drive in every consciousness to move towards excellence, to become all that we can be. And it takes a tremendous amount of pressure in one's cult to throw that drive off course and model and instill and punish intelligence and reward stupidity. There's a sustained protocol that a cult has to put a child through to instill untrustworthy behavior in that child. In other words, the cult has to be untrustworthy and has to punish trust and trustworthiness and reward untrustworthy behavior for someone to get knocked off course. And so for there to be an individual that is sociopathic, incompetent, ignorant, stupid, and thus shattering the trust, it requires sustained chronic stupidity, ignorance, incompetence from multiple sources around that individual as they matured, as they learned the system that they were born into, the cult, the identity that they were born into. So you don't get an untrustworthy person without an untrustworthy cult. Now, why is that? Well, if you're a trustworthy cult and you understand that all you need is everyone. You see, there's a lowest common denominator with trust. It's like the chain with the weakest link. And it works like this. 100 monks are in the temple chanting world peace, chanting world peace. But one of the monks is tired of all this superficial New Age bullshit and gets out a gun and says, now listen, you guys are going to do exactly what I say, or I'm going to start shooting you one after another because I'm tired of being shamed and blamed for my anger. Your daughter wasn't raped. You fuckers aren't doing anything about it. Last year, someone else was raped. You're covering up the perpetrators and glossing over it with this bullshit about world peace. Now I'm going to start shooting one after the other unless there's a commitment to do something here. Well, one person out of 100 is in a bad mood. One person out of 100, 1% is pissed off. Now, how many of the monks can continue exalted, transcendent chanting as one or the other after them gets shot in the head? You see, it just takes 1% of the population to be in a sociopathic state in order to infect, for that sociopathic state to run through the psyche of the population like wildfire. The difference between whether there is a transcendent state and the chanting continues for the rest of the evening relies on 1%. Meaning if you take good care of every one of the monks or every one of the villagers, but ignore one. If one of them is turned into the black sheep, if one of them is scapegoated, if one of them is transformed into the unwelcome guest in Rumi's guest house and has no place at the table. That one, in Jung's words, in Carl Jung's words, that which is suppressed, denied, and unloved, deteriorates, regresses, and becomes hostile towards the cult that banished it, that isolated it, that pushed it away. When little Jenny raises her hand and saying, "I saw Daddy kissing that woman across the street," and the hatred of an entire family that is more committed to maintaining the delusion of its facade than embracing truth and beauty and innocence into the world, turns on little Jenny. She's sent to her room. When she cries, she's told she's a crybaby. Her innocence is being pulled off her like fresh skin on the body. And when she screams, she is shamed for the grief of having her soul raped of the beauty of truth, the beauty of seeing, to cover up the stupidity of a family that cannot face itself with any integrity, with any integration. And the healthiest voice at the table is the one persecuted. Is that intelligence, or is that profound stupidity? You see, when you have a chain that's nice, fresh, galvanized links, this chain is rated with a break point of 200,000 pounds. It's incredibly powerful. Now, if along one of these links on this 100-foot chain, we saw through and saw through and saw through and rust and corrode, we get it down to the point where that link in the chain will break if more than 1,000 pounds are put on it. It's a 200,000-pound chain, but one of the links has been weakened, infected, and now it's going to break at 1,000 pounds. The entire chain is now a liability, because for a 1,000-pound chain, you don't need it to weigh a ton. You just need a tiny little chain. And it's dangerous if you don't see the cuts and you're trying to stop a boat ramming into a jetty with a tugboat and the thing snaps and the shipping boat crashes into the dock. It's worse than nothing because you're trusting the rating of the chain, but you're not seeing there's a broken part. And this is the problem with families and communities. When you hide and create taboos, when you scapegoat and create black sheep, and try and bury the weak link in the family narrative in one person, the family can break at that point. It takes a very stupid family to do that. Well, how many families don't do that? Are there any families that celebrate the diverse truths and perspectives of all of their own member's psyche and have an intelligent use for each data point that is produced by all those diverse perspectives. Because if you listen to an entire healthy family talk about anything, it's as if 100 million cameras are placed all around the globe, and each camera sees the world from a different perspective. And if you want to see the whole, if you want the one to take shape before your eyes, you have to honor the camera that's picking up the snow at the North Pole. You have to honor the camera that's picking up the 130-degree heat at the equator. You have to pick up the nude beach in Rio de Janeiro and the prudish bathing suits in Portsmouth in England. You've got to look at the depth of emotion in this region at this moment in time and the complete sociopathic detachment and cold thinking in another region. You have to understand the probability field that is humanity. And for that, you need all the data. It's night and it's day simultaneously. It's just one camera is in Australia, another's in North America. It's hot and cold simultaneously. It's just one camera's at the North Pole and the other is in Rio de Janeiro. It's corrupt and honest simultaneously. There's corruption going on over here in this moment, and there's integrity happening over here in this moment. And so it doesn't simplify down to a simple narrative. It expands into an ever-increasingly complex narrative. And the question is, do we trust the narrative? Now, what does it mean to trust? It means to be vulnerable. What does it mean to be vulnerable? It means to allow influence. What does influence mean? It means that you can change me. If you're holding hot rocks with fireproof gloves straight from a volcano, and I get within 1 foot of you, what am I trusting? What's my vulnerability? Well, for one, you could just move those rocks to both sides of my body, and I would die a horrible death of burns. It could cook my head in a matter of 30 seconds at 4,000 degree heat on both sides. So what am I trusting as I get near you? I'm saying I'm trusting that you're intelligent enough that you don't want to create unnecessary suffering by killing me. And I'm trusting that you're intelligent enough to know that 4,000 degree rocks could severely hurt or kill me. So that's what we're trusting. We're talking about vulnerability. Now, vulnerability is neutral. And what neutral means is that there are as many bad things that could happen as a result of vulnerability as there are good things. If I get close to you, you could give me a massage. That goes on the positive side. Or you could punch me in the face. That goes on the negative side. You could learn something about me that you would use to hurt me later. That's on the negative side. You could learn something about me to praise me later. That's on the positive side. And so vulnerability is neutral. It is exposure to impact. Now, if I'm raised in a sociopathic and incompetent cult, then I have to put up walls against both sides of the exposure. I have to be less vulnerable. And there's a good reason for that in the hierarchy of human needs, meaning the first human need is survival. Now, how many people does it take to kill another human being? Just one. It just takes one person with the poison, with the gun, with the not looking where they're driving, with the, oh, I forgot to hold the safety rope. One person out of 10, 20, 30, 50,000 people we're going to encounter on the road and this, that, and the other. One person can kill us. Now, how many people have to cooperate for someone to live? Everyone. Every person has to cooperate for you and I to exist to this point. And if one person decides to make it their mission that this person no longer exists and stop cooperating with our life, with our continuance, they can interrupt it. So it takes everyone to participate, to collaborate, for something to exist, for a human being to live, but only one to stop it. Now that's a bias towards the negative. In relationships, it takes two people to say yes to an amicable agreement. It takes only one person to say no. You want to have a relationship with someone. You want to be sexual with someone. How about it? This is great. I'm really interested in this. The other person says no. Two people to say yes, one person to say no. I'm really enjoying this relationship with you. Can we take it deeper? Two people to say yes. One person says, no, I'm done with this. You have a fragility. And in that fragility is their respect for identity and trustworthiness. And we are deteriorating into a cult of walls, into a cult of facades and masks. Because it does take two people to say yes and one to say no. And too many people are saying no in brutal, in harsh ways that leave scars, that leave trauma, that leave people hanging. So the only solution is defense against both sides. Now, for all the energy that goes around this equation of intimacy and vulnerability, blocks the vulnerability, that energy in a more intelligent culture is going into learning the art and skill of creating beauty, truth, goodness, of using that vulnerability to create joy, to create healing. And on the intelligence continuum, the most intelligent culture is using all of their energy to create and sustain higher and higher levels of well-being for each person. And it has to be each person. There's no exceptions in an intelligent culture. There's no black sheep. There's no scapegoats. First of all, we're all part of a same the same equation. We're part of a fractal pattern. And so when there are individuals that are banished, that are made into outlaws out there, that cannot happen in a cult that does not make parts of the psyche banished and outlaws. Because it begins inside the cult with saying certain thoughts are taboo, certain feelings that come from those thoughts are taboo. And so we're going to hide them, we're going to bury them, and we're going to punish anyone who reveals them, who breaks with the politically correct narrative. Well, when everyone is fighting to hide a part of themselves, that energy goes underground, but it needs to take form. It's part of the psyche. In truth, it's a mathematical equation. And so if there's 33% of the self being buried and hidden, in the fractal expression of that, 33% of the larger population will end up being the secret keepers of that part of the psyche. And as they are punished and buried in an externalization of the stupidity of our own relationship with ourselves, what happens within us happens within them. They deteriorate, they become bitter, they become hostile, they regress, they become less mature, they don't evolve, just like the parts of us that we hate and hide and throw bricks at does not become more intelligent and competent in that treatment. It becomes more traumatized and more hostile towards the cult that is making it the enemy. And so in untrustworthy cults, we do not trust the part of ourself that we are turning into a scapegoat. And so we pillory it and bully it and dissociate from it inside. And then we do not trust the people in the cult that are made into the black sheep and the scapegoat, and they are pilloried and attacked. And the parts of us and the part of the cult that are marginalized and attacked become hostile, regress, and seek to destroy the cult that is too stupid to integrate love and respond to their pain. An intelligent cult would integrate love and respond to their pain. A stupid cult would emphasize that it's all this person's fault. Well, where did that person come from? Out of nowhere? Had nothing to do with the stupidity of their parents, the stupidity of their high school principal, the stupidity of the lovers they attempted to date. Had nothing to do with the cruelty of their mother? Nothing? Okay, well then they had fucked up parents. It's their fault. And where were the parents raised? The parents were raised in this lovely, psychologically literate, healthy, non-shame-based, beautiful culture that taught good parenting and gave people scores and revealed the statistical probabilities of how likely they were to fuck up their children before they got pregnant, and did all this wonderful stuff, and then suddenly these horrible parents emerged out of nowhere. It's ridiculous to pretend there's no correlation between an individual or a certain demographic in a cult and the cult memes, the recipe that produces that, statistically speaking. And yet that's the game of self-referential defensive cults, is they produce all kinds of pain and unnecessary suffering and stupidity. They blame it all on a small, weak demographic in the cult hierarchy of power. Everyone agrees to banish and scapegoat the unwelcome aspects of self. And then the unwelcome aspects of self seek to undermine the system that is too stupid to do something more useful with that energy. So there we have the system that we are all part of. Every single one of us that doesn't go out and help another set of parents become parentally literate is part of a cult that sustains chronic parental illiteracy, cradle to grave, without a single hour of competent scientific training on how to be an excellent parent. So you can trust things to be what they are. You can trust intelligence to be at the level that it is. You can trust the statistics that are present to remain constant unless things change. You can trust what is. You can trust yourself to create what is the same way you did before. Meaning, I'm looking through this lens, and it's a lens that produces the concept of stupidity, for example. So I can trust that my lens will create stupidity in the patterns before it. Now, I will continue to see stupidity all around me as long as I look through this lens. You can trust me to do that. I can trust me to do that. These eyes have seen inner and outer stupidity for as long as I remember. And it's a hereditary meme, meaning I grew up with a father that saw everything around him as stupid. Why was Dane stupid here? Why was Dane stupid here? Why was this stupid? Everyone's stupid, right? So many of these things are hereditary, meaning it's not an accident that that's one of the ingredients in this narrative. If you take a glass and you fill it with arsenic, and then you pour half of the arsenic out and mix in some water, there's still arsenic in there. If you abuse a child, they do some therapies and get rid of some of the abuse, and the rest of it remains in some form, then that's part of the identity, part of the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And you say, well, what a bad dad. Well, if you follow the individual, you see the entire cult. If you understand the cult fully, every individual within that cult will be understandable, because you will see some mix of the recipes and patterns of the overall cult that have been uniquely combined to emphasize certain parts of the cult in that individual. If you understand the cult, you understand the individual. If you understand the individual, you understand the cult. If you understand a life form, you understand the ecology that gave rise to that life form. Because if you're a scientist, it doesn't make sense that I have a nose unless you understand that these plants back here are producing oxygen. The one makes no sense without the other. The one leads to the other. The entire universe, the entire possibility field is contained in the multiplicity, in the exponential expression of one possibility. In order for one possibility to be possible, all possibilities have to be possible. In order for all possibilities to be possible, one possibility has to be possible. So, trust is in many ways the most valuable thing on the planet, because it includes predicting the future. If I trust you not to shoot me, and I'm wrong, and you shoot me, then I've estimated what I thought the future would be based on erroneous data. I missed something. Because if I'd seen the full equation and wanted to put it together, I would have seen that you must shoot me for the equation to be accurate. Meaning, you've never learned to do anything but shoot people you hate. This, and this, which I do, bring up helplessness in you that you digest as hate. I've done this, and this. Five times. So you've got 16 units of hate in you, and you can only digest 12 before you react. Now, if I knew that, I would know that doing this, and this one more time in this context would result in the gun coming out and being shot. But I have to be willing to see you in order to know that and trust that what I see is accurate. And you've got to be constructed that way, which means you need a cult, you need an environment that constructs you that way. So trust is the most valuable thing because it correlates with an accurate prediction of the future. Imagine if an investor knew exactly when Bitcoin was going to go up and exactly when it was going to go down with absolute certainty. Then they could go on to a foreign exchange, leverage up 1,000%, start with, why not start with $1,000, leverage up 100 times, $100,000. Now $100,000 goes up $3,000 in Bitcoin's price in this next day. Okay, that's $300,000 in the first 24 hours. Next 24 hours, we're starting with $300,000. Do the same thing, only this time it goes down, you short it. Got tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions upon billions of dollars in a week if you have absolute certainty. Can I trust you to do what? To do what I want you to do what you've always done, to do what all of the momentum in your life says you're going to do? Can I trust you? Reality is trustworthy to do what it does in the way that it does it. It is reliably predictable. Are you trustworthy to see reality as it is? And then, are you trustworthy to take what is and create sustainable well-being for yourself and others with what is? Or are you trustworthy to take what is and attack it with hate, with rage, with cynicism, with disgust? What can you be counted on to do when you see clearly what is? What do you do with it? When you realize it's not your fantasy. This is what's going on. What do you do? Do you hate it? Do you love it? Do you run from it? What's the result? How often do you do that? When do you behave this way versus this way? Can you trust, can you see yourself enough to be worthy of trusting yourself in that you can predict how you will and will not behave in a variety of ways. Thanks for joining me on this exploration of trust. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.